to our, we'll record this so that we can upload to the YouTube video, and those who can't make it today can reference some of the answers that are provided. Additionally, we have quite a few questions that have been submitted. If we don't get to the question that was submitted prior to, we ask that you also drop that in the chat, and the chamber will be compiling answers to questions that we don't get to answer live today. And we will also be putting that up on our website and sending that out to everyone who inquires. So starting with brief introductions. I'm Maria Diaz. I am the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and I've been serving in this role for 8 years. And you know, the purpose and the mission of the Chamber is to be able to help the small businesses that are in our community. We serve businesses from as far south as Canal Street all the way to 34th Street. We've been doing this for quite a few decades now, since 1949. And we want to welcome all of our members. I see quite a few members that are on the call, and also welcome our non-members, and you know, use this opportunity to let you all know that the Chamber will continue to fulfill its mission by providing networking events, providing educational opportunities, connecting your businesses with elected officials, hearing your stories so we can relay that to the people who are making policies to make it easier for you to run your business in New York City. So with that said, I want to just kick it right off and do a quick run through of Erik's bio, and then start by giving him an opportunity to speak before we go into questions. So Mr. Bottcher is a New York City politician who dedicates his work towards progressive causes and overall bettering the community he's involved in. In 2021, he was elected as a New York City councilman to represent District 3, which includes the neighborhoods of Greenwich Village, Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen, Flatiron, Hudson Square, Times Square, the Theater District, the Garment District, and Columbus Circle, quite a few neighborhoods. Prior to becoming part of New York City's council member, Erik began his public career service in 2009 as the LGBTQ and HIV/AIDS community liaison in the City Council's Community Outreach Unit, and after served as the statewide LGBTQ community liaison in the governor's office. Now, as New York City Council member, Mr. Bottcher is here with us today. I'd like to give you the mic to be able to say a little bit about like plans for the businesses in the area, your plans as council member. Take it away.
Maria, thank you so much. It's really great to see you on here, and I'm really excited to work with you in this new capacity. Maria and I have worked together for the last 8 years. When I was just a staffer at the City Council, starting when you were just began as the head of the chamber. And I just really want to thank you for everything that you've done for our community. For folks who don't know, Maria is constantly working to find innovative ways to help our local businesses from the Village, Chelsea, and we've worked together on a lot of different initiatives, both before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened, Maria, I think I can speak for both of us when I say that it presented challenges unlike anything any of us ever envisioned. And I remember talking to you, Maria, in those early days when you were just getting a flood of inquiries from businesses, when things were just falling apart, things closing, businesses just desperate for any kind of assistance at all. And you did it, and the chamber did a great job just getting out the info in real time. And we worked together on that, getting out the information. Unfortunately, the scope of the problem was so big. It's just been devastating for businesses in our community and across the country, but particularly here in New York City, which has been the epicenter of the virus and was again just a couple months ago. So it's been a very hard time financially for small businesses. So many of them have closed, so many are hanging on by a thread. And psychologically. It's like we're here, we're nearing the end. Wait, shut down again, open, shut, open, shut. And I don't know about you, but this last Omicron variant was just so hard because it just felt like things were getting almost about to come back. The restaurants were filled. Broadway was sold out. Office workers were looking forward to coming back at the beginning of the year. We were looking forward to coming back in our district office in January. We're still in hybrid. So we're not out of the woods yet. However, I do feel optimistic about the future. I really believe that if we can get past this, once we get past the coronavirus, if we can break out of this start-stop pattern, I really believe that we could have the best decade in the history of New York City. Because after what we've been through, people are so anxious and excited to be around people, to experience art, to experience culture, to patronize businesses, to dine, to see theater, to create. And I think we could have the best decade in the history of New York, but our government has to make the right decisions. And that's what I look forward to speaking to you about today.
Absolutely. If anything, New York City residents and businesses are resilient. So we know that we are on our way to coming back. Some businesses still are hanging on, but we're here to do what we can to help everyone. So I'm going to dive into some of the questions that we have received so far. So the first question that I have is, what steps has the New York City Council taken to help small businesses during this pandemic? And the follow-up is, what of these measures are still available for our businesses to take advantage of?
So I'm transporting myself back to March of 2020, when this thing just came like a wrecking ball and the city was scrambling to react. One of the first things that happened was the city put out grants, low interest loans and no interest loans and grants. Those evaporated like that. They just, if you remember, the link was up one day and it was gone the next. That those funds were exhausted and they weren't that substantial. The big push was then for federal assistance, where the money was, the billions of dollars were. And we pushed and got the federal government to do the loans, the grants that came out, the PPP grants. That saved a lot of businesses. But one action that the city council took early on that I believe saved thousands of businesses was suspending the personal liability provisions of the leases of COVID impacted businesses. So for folks who know, in a lease, the landlord is generally, if you are in default of your lease, the landlord can go after you personally, after your personal assets. And that is one of the things that locks people in to leases, and they often can't negotiate as well as they would need to, because the landlord knows at the end of the day, they could go after that person's personal assets. So the city council passed legislation suspending that, and that really allowed businesses to negotiate with their landlords and gave them the ability to walk away if they needed to, because they knew that they wouldn't be personally pursued. That was renewed again in September by the city council. It's been challenged in court by the real estate industry. They claim that it's not constitutional, but that is something very impactful that I actually believe should be a permanent feature of New York City. The city council also strengthened the city strengthened the commercial lease assistance program, and that program provides lease-related assistance and counseling for small businesses and tenants, and now includes in-court representation for tenancy issues. Also, very importantly, was suspending or waiving financial penalties for many of the fines that small businesses get. This is something that I hear from all the time from small businesses who feel like the city has been on their back, nickel and diming them, fining them, showing up for unannounced inspections, trying to ticket them for this, ticket them for that. You'll have different inspectors giving them different guidance. So the city waived a lot of these fines and put in a system to allow small businesses to fix a violation before paying a fine and not giving them a fine on the first offense. For example, small business owners, they had to pay a fee if they didn't properly label garbage bins. That kind of thing, which would be a hefty fine for a small business, now give them the opportunity to correct that mistake. So I think that this makes sense, working with small businesses and having the city be a support to small businesses, not an enemy of small businesses. That having been said, we do have to start, I believe, enforcing some of the things that we've really been lax on. For example, a property owner is responsible for keeping the sidewalk in front of his or her property clean, 18 inches out into the street from the curb. The Department of Sanitation really hasn't been giving businesses fines for that, because businesses are reporting that they're short-staffed. They're on like a skeleton crew. They don't have the staff that they normally have to be outside sweeping throughout the day, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. I understand that, but it is contributing to what we're seeing in the city, the sanitation problems. So we are going to have to find a balance between really giving folks a lot of leeway and making sure that folks do follow the regulations, particularly with things like sanitation.
And that segues into my next question. So one of our members had submitted a question about sanitation in the district, and I know that part of your platform has been to improve that. So you mentioned, trying to find that balance between being lenient, but also making sure that people are not walking through piles and piles of garbage. Do you have any ideas of how to improve that? Because I know you mentioned that there's staffing issues on the business side, but there's also seems to be staffing issues on the city side in terms of getting the garbage trucks out there and getting it's not necessarily the city, but like the independent sanitation companies that come in and help that. So what are your thoughts on improving that on not only the business owner side, but also on the city and on the sanitation side?
You're right that sanitation is one of the issues that I've been very vocal about. It's something I talked a lot about during my campaign for city council, and it's something that I've been speaking out about since I joined the city council 6 weeks ago, because to me, sanitation is more than just an aesthetic issue. It's a small business issue. If there is overflowing waste baskets on the corner, if there's piles of trash in the street, if there's trash explosions on every block, that's going to affect our local small businesses. It's going to affect our economy. People are in decision-making mode right now. Are they going to stay in New York, or are they going to leave New York? Should we leave with our family? Should we come back to New York, or should we stay away where we've been? Should we bring our business back, or should we not? Should we go to another state? And every overflowing waste basket really hurts us a lot. So the city cut sanitation when COVID hit by huge numbers. We had let's look at corner basket pickups, the truck routes that service the corner litter baskets. We had over 700 truck routes a week when before COVID. We cut that to over 200 when COVID happened, and that made some sense because people were in quarantine, right? We didn't have the crowds of people. But then the next year, they restored it, but only to over 400 a week. So we're still at just over half of what we were before. So we're seeing overflowing waste baskets, particularly in Council District 3. We have a lot of foot traffic. We have a lot of tourists. We have a lot of office workers. So especially on weekends, right? The trash cans on weekends, I hear it all the time from residents and businesses. It's a big problem. So we need that funding restored. Unfortunately, in last week's proposed budget that the mayor put out, he's cutting sanitation even more, cutting the cleaning and collection budget line by 44.2 million. And also he is suspending the expansion of the curbside compost program. Another big problem, because the curbside compost program is something that our district had before COVID. And what that is, the Department of Sanitation will pick up the compost, the organic waste, to a building alongside the landfill bound trash and the recycling. So you can put out your food scraps just like you would recycling. And that helps in a few ways. Number one, it helps the environment, because that food waste otherwise would go to the landfill and it would decompose into CO2, methane emissions. But it addresses the rat problem in our neighborhoods. Why is that? Because when you put your landfill bound waste out on the sidewalk on trash collection night, it sits there oftentimes, right? You're allowed to put it out after 5 o'clock, I believe. It often doesn't get picked up till the early hours in the next day. So you're basically putting out a buffet for rats every day. So we need to get that food waste out of the landfill bound trash. That's why I talk about, when you talk about composting in those terms, people really start to get it. Oftentimes they think that composting contributes to rats because, oh, we're putting out the food scraps. The opposite's true, because you're putting the food scraps in the sealed container. You're getting it out of that trash bag that was on the sidewalk. So we need that funding restored, not cut. So the city council is going to be negotiating the budget with the mayor over the next few months. We have till the end of June to pass the budget. I'm really going to be fighting to reverse that decision, because I think it'd be very bad for the city.
So I'm sure that there are many members and many people participating on this call. I hear that, and sure are not too happy about that. How would you recommend that residents and business owners participate in the decision making of the elected officials in the area? How can they get involved in the process to change things in New York? Who do they go through? Do they go through you? I mean, the chamber obviously sits here to serve as a liaison. So, come through us, but how would you advise business owners to get involved in this process?
Please do always reach out to our council office with any concerns, suggestions, but also during the budget negotiations, we're going to be having hearings. We're going to be having budget hearings in each subject area. Each committee has budget hearings. So there will be a hearing on the sanitation budget. There will be a hearing on the housing budget, a hearing on the education budget. Please come to those hearings, and we'll be putting that on my social media feed where they are. You can also go to council.nyc.gov, www.council.nyc.gov, and you can go and find the hearing topics. We're doing hybrid now, so you can do it on Zoom, which is a lot easier than before, when you'd have to go and wait around in the council chambers all day to testify. They still take a long time. but it's easier on Zoom. We need people to hear from residents about this, and we're going to be coming out with, distributing additional ways to contact the administration about sanitation in particular, because we think that it's a very important issue that often gets lost in the shuffle. When you think about picking up the trash, people just kind of take it for granted. Well, of course, the city is going to do that. They're not doing it like they need to. So we need to speak out.
Thank you. So you mentioned hearings and participation on businesses. One particular topic that there have been quite a few hearings on and lots of participation is the open dining program. And I know that it's helped our businesses, but we have many residents that are very concerned about, again, going back to what you said, the lacks of the city enforcing some of the conditions that were set forth. I know that there are going to be lots of changes to it, but can you describe where you stand and what the progress status of the open dining program is?
So the background here for folks who might not know is that during COVID, in April and May of 2020, when people were prohibited from dining inside, the city enabled restaurants to put tables out in the street. And that was an emergency measure that really saved a lot of small businesses from closing, when restaurants, when they really couldn't serve inside, they were legally prohibited from serving inside. It wasn't safe. So they put out these outdoor setups, and that spring and summer, they became popular with a lot of people. And even when the indoor was permitted, they've been allowed to keep that. This emergency program was extended. And there's a flip side to that, though, and that is that it's presented issues, particularly in areas where there's a high concentration of these outdoor setups. And people have built these sheds. I don't know if we want to call them sheds, but that's what they are, these structures. Many of them are like almost entirely enclosed. Some of them are very pretty. Some of them are not so pretty. Some of them are actually like abandoned. And some people like them, some people don't like them. The decision was made like a year and a half ago to create a permanent program to extend outdoor dining beyond this crisis. But the details of that were left up to the future, right? They were left up to really the future city council. So one of the first things that has been put in our lap is figuring out, what does this future outdoor dining program look like? And whenever you talk about the public sphere, public space that belongs to everyone in New York and how we should use it, it's one of the most controversial things that could be discussed in New York. In a city of 8.5 million people, getting people to agree on what we should use our public land for, whether that be a lot. That's why you have these big fights between parks and affordable housing sometimes. What's that lot going to look like, that publicly owned lot? Or in this case, the streets, right? Should they be parking spaces? Should they be outdoor dining? Should they be gardens? Should they be playgrounds? Or should they just be empty curb to allow for curb access? So the job of a legislature is it's a tough job to kind of craft something that works best, really craft a compromise. And what I want to do is help come up with something that works for all neighborhoods. And there's a lot of neighborhoods in the city that haven't had outdoor dining before, which by the way, I didn't even realize how little outdoor dining there was pre-pandemic. We have a fair amount in our district, but some parts of the city had almost none before. So a new system's being put into place to allow for the outer boroughs to get all this additional outdoor dining. The problem is for a neighborhood like ours, particularly, down the village where you have a very high concentration of restaurants. There's been some areas where the current system just ain't working. Like down on Sullivan and Thompson and McDougal, you've got just like one long shed going the whole length of the block, and you can't see the storefronts. You can't access the curb in many places. And there's been a real enforcement problem. The city has not been enforcing. They laid out all these rules for the restaurants, but they haven't been enforcing the rules. And I think they're taking the same approach that I mentioned before with the fines and the fees. They're only giving warnings, really. And which in that might work in some instances, but what it's also done is it's undermined the confidence of a lot of people that the city is ever going to really enforce any rules. So yeah, you say that you're going to have the outdoor dining end at a certain hour. Why should we believe that the city is going to enforce that? They haven't been enforcing it the last 2 years. So that's what we're up against. I really think that we need to come up with something sensible that keeps the best parts of outdoor dining and really addresses some of the big problems with it. It's going to be controversial. I'm working closely with community members, with my colleagues in the city council. I'm hoping to have the opportunity to be part of the negotiations. And I'm working closely with Council Member Chris Marte and Gail Brewer. We're going to be insisting on really being part of these negotiations, because generally, historically, you'd have the bill sponsor and the speaker's office would really do the negotiations with the mayor's administration, and then just kind of let everyone else know where they ended up. We don't want that to work this way, because our districts have the most outdoor dining. So we really want to be involved. And I believe we will be involved. I believe that they are going to listen. That's what's going to happen in the coming weeks regarding this issue.
So this particular issue was, a saving grace for a lot of the businesses that the hospitality industry. Are there programs that are being discussed that will help other businesses that are not necessarily in the hospitality industry?
There was a program called Open Storefronts, which would allow non-restaurants to put out goods in the street. And that, for one reason or another, that didn't take off. And that, I'd really like to revisit that to see why not, because retail has really taken a huge hit before the pandemic and after. As online shopping becomes more and more part of people's daily lives, this upcoming generation of people, of consumers, asking them to go to the store and buy something, asking a 20-year-old to go to the store and buy something, unless it's perishable, unless it's a service, that's becoming a foreign concept to a lot of people. And that's really hurting retail stores, gift shops, bookstores, hardware stores. So we need to be much more creative in thinking about ways to help non-bars and restaurants. Because the other thing is, a lot of property owners, they don't want to rent to a restaurant or a bar. There's a property owner on Bleecker Street who's storefront has been empty for a long time. And I asked them, why haven't you rented out that storefront? They said, because I live on the second floor and I don't want a bar and a restaurant. I could rent it to a bar and a restaurant like that. I can't get a tenant that's not a bar and a restaurant. And, you know, a lot of that's because of the changing nature of retail, but we also have to provide new financing mechanisms. I support the creation of a New York City public bank that could be tailored primarily to supporting small businesses and MWBE businesses and neighborhoods that have had trouble getting financing. We need to provide legal assistance, recruitment and training, business education. We need to help with all the violations that I talked about before, cutting down the violations. And we need to stop jacking up the property taxes every year. The property taxes, the city of New York has exponentially increased property taxes. This is something I hear from a lot of businesses, and that puts a lot of pressure on commercial rents and residential rents. And the city needs to cool it with the property tax increases. We also have to, there's a property tax commission that is in the process of addressing some of the inequities in the property tax code. You've got a lot of single family homeowners who pay a lot less taxes, property taxes, than others. So there's inequities to fix right there. But I really want to address revisit the open storefronts program and try to make that a success, because we can't focus exclusively on the hospitality industry. Very important industry, but a neighborhood can't be hospitality only. We need goods and services and a healthy mix of retail options.
Absolutely. And I know that we've taken surveys of some of our businesses in the neighborhood, and for that particular program where businesses were able to use their storefront and their street front to be able to expand their business, it was just a challenge, obviously with staffing issues. Like putting out a shed seems a little bit more viable than putting out like a rack of clothes or books out on the street or hammers or things like that, right? Like you need to add staffing and security and things. So there has to be ways that we can help those industries, like other industries besides the hospitality, which obviously does need the help, but we need to spread the wealth and be able to help people in ways that are actually viable for the businesses to undergo. So a little shift in topics, talk about safety in the neighborhood. I'm going to read some statistics that we gathered from a comparison from January of 2021 to January of 2022 in terms of the rates of these. I have 7 different categories of crimes. Of all of them, there's only one category that has gone down, and that's the murder rate. But rape is up 26.7%, robbery up 33%, felony assault also up 33%, grand larceny a whopping 58.1%. Talk to us a little bit about improving the safety of our environment in our neighborhoods.
This is right up there with sanitation and quality of life. Public safety is something that I hear most about from my constituents. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of concern, and it really breaks my heart. I was talking to my mother this weekend, who's coming to town for my inauguration in a couple of weeks, and she's scared to come to New York City. She said, "Eric, am I gonna get hit?" That just made me want to cry. It just made me want to cry. One of the first things I did when I took office is I met with the commanding officers of each of the precincts covering our council district. And I did that to establish a open channel of communication, a strong working relationship, smooth lines of communication between the precinct and me, the precinct and my staff. I brought my staff with me, make sure we all had each other's cell phone numbers so we could address in real time, so we could be as helpful as possible to our local precincts as they address the issues that really police need to address. So I believe that there are some things that you do need police for. I also believe that there are many things that the police have been relied on to do historically that we need civilian resources to address, like mental health emergencies, right? And that's something that I made a huge priority of mine when I was running for city council, is the mental health crisis affecting New York City. And you don't have to walk far in our neighborhoods to see people suffering from untreated mental illness on the streets, people suffering terribly. The most horrible manifestation of this crisis has been some of the really horrible acts of violence, the murder of Michelle Go in my district in Times Square subway station. That really brought the issue of mental health to the front pages again. I published in the New York Daily News a plan to address mental health, 8 things that we need to do to address the mental health crisis in New York City. I will say though that it's important to note that not the vast majority of people with mental health issues are not violent, are not criminals. And the vast majority of criminals are not suffering from mental health. That having been said, you do have this terrible intersection of public safety and mental health, and we can't come at it with only a criminal justice lens, a punitive lens. That's what we've done historically, to the point where the biggest provider of mental health services in the United States is prisons and jails. The biggest provider of mental health services in the United States is prisons and jails. That's something we should all be ashamed of. So I've called for a reinvestment in inpatient psychiatric beds. We have to reverse the closure of inpatient psychiatric beds. Year over year, New York State has been closing inpatient beds. They're very expensive. The idea was, let's close these beds and let's replace them with outpatient community-based services. And that sounds great. And that's where we should try to get, but we're not adequately funding those programs. I've also called for an expansion of the clubhouse model. Fountain House in Hell's Kitchen is a community center for people with mental illness, place for people to go for opportunities for vocational training, friendship, recreation, therapy, treatment, and even housing. Because we forget at a very basic level that people need things to do during the day. They need programming, they need activities, and we're not providing those outlets. So I've called for the creation of more clubhouses around the city, and I'm very encouraged that Mayor Adams picked the former executive director of Fountain House, Ashwin Vasan, to be our next health commissioner, the commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. So I'm really hoping that mental health becomes a focus of this administration. Our failure on this issue started decades ago. We've always been failing at this issue, starting back when we had these horrible, massive psychiatric hospitals, many of which were just awful. But we closed them over years and years with the idea of replacing them with community-based outpatient services. We never really did it. We never really adequately did it. There's some great programs, but we replaced those mental health hospitals with prisons and jails. We are now decarcerating, which is a good thing. But what is the plan? The plan can't be to let people die on the street from untreated mental illness, particularly when they have a history of violence. Most don't, but some do. It's not a tenable situation, not just for New York City, but for cities around the country. I talked a lot about mental health. Let's talk about gun violence for a minute. Gun violence has verifiably increased a lot during the pandemic. New York City is awash in guns. You got these pipelines of guns coming from states that have just eliminated their gun laws. So it's a total free-for-all in other states in the country. You got people coming into New York City with trunks full of handguns, selling them out of the trunks of their cars. We need to fund the police resources to investigate and apprehend the people who are bringing these guns into the city. Federal resources, state and city. And then we have to address the circumstances that are leading kids to pick up guns. What gets a 13-year-old to pick up a gun? A lot has gone wrong in that person's life to get a 13-year-old to pick up a gun. It's our failed education system. It's the lack of family support. So many things that we need to do better. This mayor has made this issue a priority, and they funded a massive jobs program in the next budget. I want to make sure that in our neighborhood, in Fulton houses and Elliott Chelsea houses, we do more to reach the young people there who are getting mixed up in this stuff. It's all of our responsibilities. Those are just some of the things we need to do.
And I also want to plug one of the programs that the Chamber has initiated over the last few years. And obviously because of COVID, we haven't been able to execute it as originally planned, but the Chamber has our Safe City, Safe Streets program, where initially it started out as a luncheon where we honor the officers from each of the precincts that the Chamber touches upon. But a few years ago, we expanded that program so we can do meet and greets between business owners and the commanding officers of each of the precincts. So we invite businesses that are in each of the precincts to come to have a more intimate meeting that's solely focused on the interaction between business owners, not just like residents in the community, but like business owners and officers. We've had meetings where a business owner will talk about something like, you know, that there's a person who's constantly in their store that's threatening their businesses, their customers. And we have had an NCO go directly, like shortly thereafter, to check out the premises. We've had commanding officers who have tried to resolve the situation, and we've had some positive results as a result of hosting those events. So if you haven't participated in one of our precinct tours, we will be bringing those back again this year. And then we also do have the honoring of the officers for those that do go above and beyond and do our Cop of the Year event at the end of the year, always at the Manhattan Penthouse. So we look forward to having businesses participate, sponsor, and bring forth that event.
And I've been to that before, and it's really great to see when you pull back the curtain and demystify the way everything works and establish close working relationships with all city agencies and our small businesses, including the police department. It really helps to have those open lines of communication. And I do thank you for also honoring there are some real heroic actions that often don't get recognized. And it's always great to, for all public servants to give them that recognition. There's a lot of negativity in the world. There's, we rarely focus on the positive, but there's good things happening in New York. You read the headlines, what's the saying? If it bleeds, it leads. There's a lot of good things too, and we need to stop and really focus as well on the good things that happen. It'll help us all in the long run.
So, so the small businesses and small organizations and like that the chamber represents are not all, all the same. We have nonprofits that we represent, and one of the questions that we received from one of our nonprofit members is the funding of some programs that they run. Can you talk about some funding for the different types of nonprofits that exist that can be members of the chamber?
We are
that we can bring back as well.
Sure. So we're so blessed in New York City to have an incredible array of not-for-profit organizations. We have a constellation of nonprofits that work on every issue under the sun, from, they treat young people, seniors, people with disabilities. Nancy Miller, hi Nancy, from Visions on 23rd Street, Visions services for the blind, and they have housing there and services serving thousands and thousands of people from the whole metropolitan area. So the city council, one of the most important jobs of the city council is to allocate discretionary funding to non-for-profits. In the $100 billion city budget, a few hundred million is earmarked to the city council, and the speaker and the council members decide how that's distributed. And it's really an opportunity to help get funding directly to local non-for-profits that might otherwise not get that funding through an RFP with a city agency. So in my council office this spring, the deadline for discretionary funding, I think, is today.
It is today.
Is it today? Okay.
Jump right off of this call, yes.
But then, capital, we also give capital funding that's for like brick and mortar construction and renovation. That deadline is in 2 days, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And that's just the city council. The borough president allocates funding, and the city allocates funding, the different city agencies, Department of Cultural Affairs, et cetera. So we allocate funding, but we also try to support in any other way by being a resource to local non-for-profits, helping them with issues that they run into with the city. If folks are watching who are with a non-for-profit, please feel free to invite me to come see the organization. If you have anything going on that you'd like our constituents to know about, please let me know. We'll put it on our social media account. We'll put it on our newsletter. We're really, really lucky on the west side of Manhattan in particular to have a really great array of non-for-profits. But it is a challenging environment for non-for-profits right now, just like it is for businesses, small businesses. The non-for-profits have really been scrambling to adapt in a few ways. You have to adapt to a world where you previously provided your services in person and you were funded on the basis of that in-person service. So a lot of nonprofits have been scrambling to get to the city and really change the way that they were funded, because we're not giving we're not seeing those in person. We're doing it virtually, but we have to come up with a different way of providing the services and getting funded for them. There's competition for donors and board members and foundations. You've got a lot of folks who've moved, who were previously really big funders of non-for-profits. So it's a challenging time, but I want everyone to know who's a nonprofit that, I'm here to support you however we can. I really recognize how lucky we are. You've got some cities, you go to upstate New York, some of these towns, they don't have non-for-profits. They're relying on like state agencies to provide a lot of services. They have just a fraction of what we have here in the city, but we have to make sure that we keep our non-for-profits, we keep them healthy, and we support them.
Thank you. We have 6 minutes left. I want to just talk a couple of things. Thank everyone again for being part of this conversation between Erik and I. And again, encourage you to continue dropping messages and chat and questions into the chat. They will be collected and answered by Erik or by other city council members that have direct say on the future of the small business community in our neighborhood. But I do want to give Erik an opportunity to say closing remarks on his hope for the small business community in our district. But before that, I do want to plug a couple of events that the chamber has coming up. We've been hosting virtual networking events throughout the pandemic and will continue to do so, but we also want to bring back some in-person events. With that said, on March 3rd, we will have our first in-person event of the year. Will be a networking event in Chelsea. Keep an eye out on our website for registration for that. We also have our annual meeting where you will hear about the programs that we ran in 2021, the programs that we hope to run in 2022, and give you an opportunity to meet our board, elect some new board members to the organization, and also let you all know that there will be plenty of educational opportunities on how to run your business, marketing opportunities that the chamber will offer. So if you are a member, keep an eye out on your email boxes for information. If you're not a member, I highly encourage you to join. We are a not-for-profit organization that relies on funding from members and sponsorships for events. So I highly do encourage, it's very affordable to be a member of the chamber. Reach out to us to ask any questions about being a member of the chamber. With that said, I will turn it back over to Erik to give us some final words on thoughts of the small business community and how we'll move forward from here.
I also want to plug the chamber. For all the folks out there, if you're not a member of the chamber, I've seen the good work that Maria and the chamber does. It really is a great value to you and your business and to the community. It's a great way of us coming together so we're not all on our own, just fighting to survive. We have to come together as a community in any way we can to support one another, to learn from each other as a community. And that's one thing that I want to leave you with, is that I am here to serve you. You are my bosses. I am your employee, a public servant. Me and my team who is here on the Zoom, I want you to know that we're here to help you in any way. You can just Google Erik Bottcher City Council. My city council page will come up. You can also go to council.nyc.gov. You can follow me on or search my name on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you can stay in direct touch with us. It's been 6 weeks that we've been in office, and I'm really, really excited for all that we're going to be able to do for you and with you in the years ahead. We're not out of the woods yet. It's going to be a rocky road, but like I said before, I really am optimistic about the future of New York City. And I think we're going to have a great decade ahead, but only if we come together and do what we need to do. Absolutely.
Talking about coming together, there's opportunities for you to have more of a direct voice in relaying these types of stories and your experiences. The chamber, has several committees that work on these topics. We have lots of seats open for an advocacy committee where we're hoping that business owners can come together and discuss in committee what is affecting, what are the issues that are affecting them, so that we could present these to our elected officials, you know, our city council members, our assembly members, our everyone that represents us on a government level. So with that said, I want to say thank you to everyone. Our contact information has been shared. VillageChelsea.com is our website. Maria@VillageChelsea is my email. Please reach out to us for any final questions that you may have, and we will upload this to our YouTube video. So thank you. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Good day. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.